Hey guys, welcome back to the tennis vlog. I know this is the one that a number of you have been waiting for. It is the highly unpredictable French Open final between unseeded Iga Swiatek and the number 4 seed Sofia Kenin, and it's my job to break it down and try and predict it for you. So pray for me. For the past 24 hours, I've been thinking and overthinking this one. I looked at the semi-final lineup for the women, and if I'm honest, this was the potential final that I least wanted to predict. There are just so many ways it could go, but you'll be happy to know that after dreaming about it for all of last night and waking up and realizing it wasn't a nightmare and I did have to predict this match, I have come to the conclusion of who I'm going with. So you don't have to watch the whole preview and then watch me deliberating at the end. I know the player that I've chosen and I'm just going to have to stick with it. So we will look at the paths to date of both players. We'll assess what they did particularly well in their semi-final clashes, and then we'll have a look at what might play out in the final and who is most likely to come through. It could go either way, very much so, and we love to see that in a Grand Slam final. It's the way it should be. So it is Kenin versus Swiatek once again. I say once again, it wasn't the case at the US Open, but generally on the women's tour at the moment, it's either an unexpected final or an speak English, Abigail, unexpected eventual champion. So we're getting kind of used to this. It's not a surprise that not many of us would have predicted this one from the outset of the tournament, because that's just the way it tends to be. Simona Halep was far too safe an option. It was too obvious, and she was taken out by our unseeded finalist in Iga Swiatek. So let's take a look at her path to date. Hasn't dropped a set. Not only has she not dropped a set, but she's not dropped more than 5 games in any one of her matches, which is deeply impressive for a woman who is still looking for her maiden title on the circuit. So big stuff from Swiatek, and she kicked things off in an impressive way that kind of foreshadowed the future, because she took out last year's finalist in the first round, Marketa Vondrousova. Vondrousova, aged 19, unseeded, made the final last year. So similarities there. It was a 6-1, 6-2 defeat at the hands of Swiatek, who moved on to take out tricky Shea Su Wei 6-1, 6-4, big hitting Eugenie Bouchard 6-3, 6-2. Then the title favourite for many and the top seed Simona Halep, she took her down 6-1, 6-2, didn't give her an opening. Halep said herself, "I did not lose that match." Swiatek won it. She gave her the credit. Then she moved on to the quarterfinals, and this was, I felt, the big test for Swiatek, because we really got to see where she was at mentally. She'd now burst onto everyone's radar. She'd just taken out Halep, and it was a case of, could she back that up, being the outright favourite to win in a match against a qualifier? And that was the first match where she was actually a breakdown at the beginning of the contest. She was 3-1 down to Trevisan, struggling with the aggressive lefty game of Trevisan that had caused so many players trouble this tournament, but eventually was able to solve her way through that one. It was 6-3, 6-1 and very convincing at the end, as was her victory in the semi-finals over another qualifier in Nadia Podoroska. Shout out to Podoroska. She had a fantastic tournament. Really showed her ability. You know, sometimes the draw does open up and players take advantage of it, but I think Podoroska really earned her way through to the semis. She's got a lot of variety in her game, took it to Svitolina in the quarterfinals, and was making sure that she was going to try and show her variety against Swiatek in that semi-final. She got to a lead in the first game of the match, which was a return game for her. She went up love 30, and then she was charging into the net, and Swiatek on the stretch just placed a really difficult ball for her to hit a half volley off, or an uncomfortable drive. That went long, and from then on it was trouble for Podoroska, because that was just the sign of Swiatek's incredible tennis IQ coming through. Now, she hits big, but she's not just a power player, this girl. She thinks her way through the matches in a similar manner to her upcoming opponent, actually, and Sofia Kenin. Two very different players, but with some definite similarities. And the use of angles, I think, is one of them. Swiatek incredible sometimes when she'd been thrown off balance and out of position, her use of the angles to get her teeth back into the rally. She made Podoroska play extra balls, but as the match went on, she was also trying and managing to finish the rallies more quickly. She'd do that a lot of times by going back behind to get the open space and then firing away a winner. I think it was her backhand that was most impressive against Martina Trevisan, but the forehand really came through against Podoroska, finding the spaces and cracking through the wind, which was very interesting because it was horrendous conditions on court Philippe Chatrier. They've had to get used to them, haven't they, at this French Open? We must admit that. But the wind was... it wasn't just strong, but it was coming in gusts as well. And if you've not been on a tennis court in the wind, that is really difficult to control. And Swiatek, moving well, getting the ball on her sweet spot, was able to cut through that wind with her power. And I think that gave people some good feelings about how things would play out for Petra Kvitova. But they were proven wrong. So let's move on. And I, indeed, was proven wrong in that prediction. To Sofia Kenin. I'll comment a little more on that semi-final after we've run through Kenin's path to date. Those of you that have been following will know that I didn't rate Kenin's chances too highly at the beginning of this tournament due to the fact that she'd been double bageled by Victoria Azarenka in Rome, that she'd gone down fairly straightforwardly to Elise Mertens at the US Open. The preparation wasn't there, but as I've said before, I'll say it again, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. And Kenin looks set on wanting to finish well. So she scraped through in 3 sets in her opening 2 rounds against Ludmila Samsonova and Anna Bogdan. As I said, I think it's the 3rd round that kind of turned things on its head because she won 6-2, 6-love over Irina Bara. Bara, not the biggest contest she was going to get. She's a small player. She can keep a lot of balls going in the rallies, but she lacks a big finishing weapon. And Kenin, the superior player there, was able to come straightforwardly. And it doesn't matter where your wins come, whether it's at an ITF level, whether it's WTA, whether it's in a final, whether it's against a player who largely competes on the ITF circuit or a WTA player. If it's a convincing win, it's a convincing win. And you take the confidence from that. I feel that Kenin did. And she really utilised it in the 4th round where she found herself a set down to Fiona Ferro, last French woman standing, who was hitting big. And Kenin really problem solved in that match, used the drop shot, mixed things up on the return, and was able to come through 2-6, 6-2, 6-1. And that's when I really started to take her seriously. You might not believe me because so far I haven't predicted her in any of my videos to win a match, but she's had 2 opponents that I thought were going to be tricky, and Danielle Collins proved it by, taking it to 3 sets in their quarter-final. But she kind of edged out that 2nd set, Collins. I feel like Kenin from the get-go there was the superior player. She was getting the points into her favour a lot. Collins not often able to finish the rallies the way that she wanted to, and so I think it was really impressive from Kenin to bounce back the way she did after really being edged in that 2nd set. She had the opportunities to get it done in straights. Collins got the break to go into the decider, and Kenin got straight to work at the beginning of the 3rd set, carried the momentum through, and took that level from the final set into her match with Kvitova. Now, this is the match that ruined my clean sweep in the semi-finals, our clean sweep, should I say. I predicted Kvitova to win in straights, which I knew was a bit daring, but I feel like I previewed a different match to the one that actually played out, because there was a huge factor, and that factor was the wind, which I noted as Swiatek versus Podoroska was going on. I pointed out that it would probably favour Kenin, and I had a lot of people coming back at me saying, no, it will favour Kvitova because she'll cut through the wind, which I understand. I understand that viewpoint because we'd just seen Swiatek really being able to cut through, generate some real pace on what is a very slow surface. But in order to generate that pace and to be so lethal, you have to be in exactly the right position. You have to get your judgment on point. And that was going to take some great movement and great thinking from Kvitova. And you could sense her uncertainty from the first ball of the match. The wind, Kenin's shots, her ground strokes, not as heavy as Kvitova's, not as heavy a shot. So the wind is going to take them a bit more. And Kvitova's timing was all over the place. I do feel that Kenin got a lot of gifts in that match, particularly on the return. Kvitova missed countless returns, and she's been nailing return winners throughout the tournament, which I think has been a real weapon in her pocket. That's what enabled her to reach this stage without having dropped a set. Aggressive off the return, even if she wasn't hitting winners, she was placing them well and setting herself up. She was working her way through points. And that was another thing. Kvitova so consistent in the longer rallies in her quarterfinal match. And we didn't see that against Kenin, just because of the sheer uncertainty of where the ball was going to land, how it was going to land, how much it was going to travel, as well as Kenin has been serving. I felt like the wind was taking her serves a bit, and Kvitova just didn't have the timing on them. But you have to give full credit to Sofia Kenin, who covered that court like lightning. Her anticipation was on point. Her returns were deep. Particularly, I felt the cross-court backhand return deep was very effective. And yeah, I think her anticipation skills were really key there in terms of getting in position, extending rallies, finishing off. It was very convincing from Kenin, and another positive for her is that she was able to regroup after having served for a straight sets win and got broken back. It would have been very easy there for her to go to pieces, let Kvitova back in, and for Kvitova to find some firm footing going into the deciding set, and that didn't happen. So you have to give Kenin the credit there. So she did come through, and she is in the final as the favourite in terms of ranking, I would add. This is a toss-up. I cannot emphasize that enough, that as much as I have been unsure of predictions in the past, I mean, I always second guess myself. This is the matchup in a Grand Slam final that is most level when you weigh up, stats, numbers, what we've seen so far. Swiatek here without having dropped a set, but Kenin here having built her momentum throughout the tournament. Both players that wouldn't have been your first pick to triumph when we came into the tournament, both players who are looking really good now. I can completely understand people predicting either way, and to be honest with you, I find it very difficult to see either of these women losing this match. These are two girls, 21 and 19, very sure of themselves in their game, both of them terrific tennis IQ, know how to think their way through matches, and have the mentality to get this done. We've heard Swiatek talk about the psychiatrist and how she's focused on the mental aspects of her game to really come through. Kenin is a player who, when she's confident, you know about it. We saw it at the Australian Open. She'd never won a Grand Slam, and she backs herself in those latter stages. Nearly lost to Ashley Barty in the semis, but was able to keep making balls and find her opening, and then came from a set down in the final to beat Garbiñe Muguruza. So, boy, is this one tough, but I do know which way I'm going to take it. Now, there's no official head-to-head for these two, but they have faced off the one time before that's recorded. They actually met in the Junior French Open, which was back in 2016, and it was Swiatek that came through on that occasion. So 4 years ago, and yeah, they were both juniors. They've come a long way since then. Tables have turned. Kenin is now a Grand Slam champion at the seniors level. That was a 6-4, 7-5 win for Swiatek. Now, the basics of their game at that point in time would have been the same. Would have been the basics. What they wanted to do with their game. The initial things that they have. Not too much will have changed. They'll just have got better from that. So they will have had the experience of facing each other's game styles before. Me, I didn't watch that match, so I haven't seen how they match up, which makes this even more difficult for me because I haven't had that example. And it was 6-4, 7-5 for Swiatek. So 2 sets, but 2 tight sets there that could have gone either way. The difficult thing for me with this match is that, both players, what they've done really well, I feel, to date is anticipate and read the game really well. And it's a case of who's going to do that better. And both players are very difficult to read. Swiatek has that short backswing. Her positioning means it's very difficult to tell which way she's going to go off forehand and backhand, and not to have that early read on her shots when she's generating so much pace can be very difficult. And she does like to mix it up sometimes with the drop shot in a very similar way to Sofia Kenin. I think Kenin has been very unpredictable on the return of serve. Now, just because she's not a power player, it means that some people can overlook the potency of that particular shot. She's got a lot of return winners this tournament, of forehand and backhand, with that angle, deep angle that she's able to generate, getting it close to the line. And sometimes you can't tell where she's going until it's too late. Very consistent when she's inside the baseline, doesn't tend to miss when she's confident, as she is now. So it's a difficult one. What can we say about how it might go? Well, I think what is interesting is that Swiatek, hasn't been tested yet at all, really. And we haven't really seen her have to problem solve. Yeah, she did have to take the wind into consideration against Podoroska. She spoke about having to change up her tactics every couple of games because it was a different match from each side of the court. Depending upon where the wind is coming from, you have to adjust to that. You have to work out how far the ball is going to travel, etc. She was able to calculate that. But as far as an opponent's game and how they're getting into hers has gone, she's taken the game to her opponents on every situation. Like, even Halep was not able to get her teeth into that match. So we've not really yet seen Swiatek in a position where she's in hot water and she's had to deal with that. Kenin, meanwhile, was in hot water a number of times at the beginning of the tournament. She's had, four 3-set matches now, and been able to problem solve and come through. We've actively seen her changing her tactics on the way through. So that's been impressive from her. Where do we finish this? I think, do you know what? I think I'm going to round out now with what I'm going to say. Very, very difficult to see how this one plays out, whether it's in straight sets, whether it goes right down the wire. I feel like in terms of their repertoires, Swiatek obviously a more powerful player than Kenin, but Kenin's movement has been so good. She's been so well balanced, reaching things, that I feel she can neutralize that more than other players have been able to. That's my feeling on this one. Even if Swiatek is that bit more difficult to anticipate where she's going than the other players she's faced, Kenin's so competitive. She loves a challenge, and I think she'll be able to extend the match in that way. So then we have to ask the question, how will Swiatek deal when that happens? Here we go then, the prediction. Maybe I've been a little bit sneaky with how I've done this, but I was completely torn. I can see Swiatek winning in straights. I can see Kenin edging out a battle. Based on the way she got into Kvitova as well, Kenin, I can see her taking it in straight sets. There are so many avenues that this could go down. And, I do think Kenin was helped a bit by the wind in her match against Kvitova, but once again, it's another confidence-boosting victory for her. I like to look at how history has gone. I take a lot from that. I probably take more from that than actual stats, because believe it or not, sometimes I don't even look at statistics before I make these predictions. I'm sat during matches, writing down notes. So I base it on what I've seen and what I feel. My gut instinct is generally takes me a fair distance. I think in this, there's quite a bit of history that could come into play. I've mentioned about Swiatek beating Marketa Vondrousova in round one. Vondrousova, who was the 19-year-old finalist last year and got beaten in the final by Ashley Barty. That becomes even more significant when you think about the different styles that Vondrousova can play, and also the fact that she hadn't dropped a set coming up to the final. Now, she had been pushed closer in her sets than Swiatek has. Swiatek hasn't even been challenged, really, but the fact remains that Vondrousova hadn't dropped a set and then dropped both sets in the final. Not only that, but I'm not sure who to credit because I can't remember who tweeted it, but I saw a really intriguing stat on Twitter that said that the last 10 women to make a Grand Slam final without dropping a set have all lost that final. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they haven't been challenged, and then suddenly they're in a high-pressure situation where they're facing the other best performer from the slam. It is likely going to be a much closer contest, whatever the final scoreline says, and they just haven't been primed for that. They haven't been toughened up. They haven't been made ready. I don't have any concerns about Swiatek's mentality here, but I really don't think she has had to problem solve as much. Based on the way she's been playing, it is so hard to predict against her because of the way that she drives the ball, the way that she can do anything off both wings. But then I have to think again about Kenin and how she's such a great problem solver. And I think back to the Australian Open, a match that I did predict her to win in 3 over Garbine Muguruza. But when she went a set down to Muguruza and Muguruza was overpowering her, I distinctly remember thinking, have I got this very wrong? Because it took a lot for me to go against Muguruza there, considering that I'd been calling her to win another slam for about a year. That definitely looked like her opening. And when she went up a set, I thought, boy, I've probably got this wrong. And then Kenin changed it up. She hung tough, she backed herself, she waited for a moment, and her ability to think her way through the match got her through. So she, having faced Kvitova, having come through that run at the Australian Open in January, is not going to be intimidated by someone who can hit so big and someone who hasn't dropped a set, particularly not on clay, which is a better surface to neutralize that on. So as much as I didn't think I'd be very confident either way in this, and still am not, I think that I have to go with the woman that I've had some gut feelings about that I couldn't quite understand in recent rounds and therefore predicted against her. That woman is Sofia Kenin, and I couldn't have predicted coming into this year that I'd be calling her to win one Grand Slam, let alone two. But hey, Angelique Kerber won the first and last Grand Slam of the year on her debut year as a top player, as it were, her breakthrough year. And I think Kenin has real chances here to do the same. So as much as this is one of the toughest ever, literally, I know I say it a lot, but it really is, I have to back here Sofia Kenin and her great mentality and the way she's been able to solve her way through matches. Even as I say that, I have visions of her getting thrashed by Elise Mertens at the US Open and going out in tears. But, you know, that was a faster surface, a different ball game. I'm backing Kenin here. It's difficult, you know, whether to say straight sets or 3 sets, because I feel like 3 sets can be a bit of a cop-out, but at the same time, I feel like I almost have to make an allowance for a similar situation to the Australian Open, where she lost the first set against Muguruza and then had to come back. It's difficult to say. I think, do you know what? I don't often go with my confidence, and I don't often really go for it. And Kenin came out with intent in that match against Kvitova. She might need a little bit more time to work it this time. So we're going to go with Sofia Kenin. Could be in straights, but I'm gonna go with the feeling that no. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and deliberate. I'm going to properly go for it this time. If we're going to go for it, let's do it. Sofia Kenin to win this in straight sets. And, you know, full credit to Iga Swiatek. I truly do believe that she could take this. I'm not necessarily sure it would be the best thing for her, like Yelena Ostapenko a few years back, to win the first title and it be such a big one, because then that's a lot of expectation on her shoulders. It might be a bit premature, but she's playing like a seasoned top 10 player. So either way, I think she would take it in her stride. But on this occasion, based on how she's proved herself throughout the event, let's take Kenin. So there's my preview and prediction for this match. We'll see how it goes. Thank you for all the comments on my previous videos. Now, I know I haven't been replying on time at the moment, but I will make time to. I've been reading the comments and I will go back and reply to comments. So thanks to everyone that's been commenting in the chat. When this one is done, if you're coming at a later date, drop me a comment. Let me know what you think of my prediction, whether you agree or disagree, who you think is going to come through this crazy close encounter. And we just got to wait and see. You know, conditions could have an impact as well. I'm not quite sure what the weather forecast is for Paris tomorrow, but yeah, this one could get interesting. So thank you very much for tuning in. We will be having one more preview and prediction. I'll be bringing that to you on Saturday, and that will be for the men's final, which is the one between the 12-time champion Rafael Nadal and the top seed Novak Djokovic. So don't miss that. Hit subscribe if you haven't. Thank you for hanging around. Well, I did actually deliberate for a little bit at the end while I thought about how many sets, but that is tough to call. I mean, it's tough enough to call the player, let alone the sets. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.